What is up, everybody? We are back. It is J Nix, and we are talking about Dragonstorm as a set and going into the pre-release coming up this Friday. So I wanted to come back, and like I did with the Aether Drift set, I wanted to give you a couple reminders, tips, tricks, and then go through. Oh man, do we have so many cards to go through and talk about of interesting and fun things that might be really good to pull in your upcoming Dragonstorm pull for the pre-release. Let's go and get into it. So as you see on the screen here, I have reminders. So reminders, things that I want to point out for you. Don't forget, if you don't get a chance to get a good meal before, you're going to be hungry, because these can go on 3, 4, 5 hours depending on what your card shop does. So bring yourself some snacks, and let's jump down to number 3. Also bring some drinks. Yes, you can always buy stuff from the local card shops, and they appreciate it, and I appreciate you supporting your local card shop. On top of that, some things that we need for the actual game, we are going to want dice for marking like +1/+1 counters, which are a big thing in this set. And then on top of that, sleeves to sleeve up your cards so you don't ruin them. You will notice we'll talk about it some with the renew mechanic, which what does that do? Hold tight, we'll talk about it. But you're going to want counter markers. So what do I mean by that? You want something like that can represent lifelink, that can represent death touch, some counter like that. I think I'm going to bring pieces of paper and just write down the counters if I need them, just to have something so I can mark it in general. But you need to make sure that you bring that, because it'll definitely help keep track of everything that's going on. So next up, we have tips, things to just remember going into a pre-release, because it's different than other formats that we have. First off, you're going to make 40 card deck minimum. You can go higher, you can't go lower. So 40 cards, how many lands does that look? You're looking at about 17-ish lands. So put in 17 lands and about 23, 24 other cards besides lands. I think I ran 16 or 15 lands in the Aether Drift pre-release, and that really worked out for me. I felt like I had just enough. And then something else, these are clan specific packs. So you're talking about Abzan, Temur, Sultai, Jeskai, and Mardu are going to be your 5 clans that you're looking at, and the packs that you can get. So what does that really mean? Well, you walk into your pre-release, you sign up, you pay your fee, and you go when they're handing out the pre-release boxes. I would like fill in clan here. For myself, I think I'm looking at Temur. It just seems to fit kind of what I want to do this time around. So I would say I would like a Temur pack. And what that means is I am going to get a pre-release kit with a dice, as you know, your promo card, as I'm sure you guys know, and 6 packs. The difference is 5 of those packs will be play boosters, and the 6th pack is going to be a clan specific pack that is going to have cards that are specific to Temur for me. So that is what is different about this. I believe we haven't seen it since Guilds of Ravnica. I think they did themed packs like that. That will help you go into your different colors and give you a good jump start on really what you want to do. So make sure you have an idea going in what you're looking at doing. I'm hoping we can get to the answers here today. So next up, we have Dragonstorm tricks. So these are going to be all the new mechanics in Dragonstorm. There are some old mechanics, but there is so many new ones, and they're all clan specific. I don't remember exactly which ones go to which, but let's start with one of them that I do know, the Jeskai one, Flurry. So what is Flurry? That just means when you cast your second spell on each turn, you get some sort of payoff, whether it is a copy, whether it is a +1/+1 token, or counter, something like that. That's going to be what Flurry is. So second time you cast a card during your turn, you get a payoff. Next up, we are looking at Endure. So Endure has an X next to it because when you see Endure, you will typically see a number of some sort next to it. And what does that mean? So Endure is basically, it is going to give you a choice, okay? Give you a choice of creating plus X counters, looking at our X there, or you can create a XX token. So say Endure is 5. You can choose to either give your creature +5/+5, a specific creature, that many counters on them, or you can create a 5/5 token. So that is Endure in a nutshell for us. Next up, Mobilize. So Mobilize is going to be your Mardu mechanic. So what you're looking at for Mobilize is when a creature attacks, similar to Endure, it has an X next to it. So when a creature attacks, give X amount of 1/1 warriors that are attacking. The thing to keep in mind about this is the warriors come in automatically attacking. They didn't get turned into attacking. So anything that targets creatures when they go to attack will not target these warriors. That is a separate trigger that is already passed. So these warriors instantly come in and they're attacking. And you'll see that this could potentially be really good for token decks. Now, our next one, Renew, which I believe is Sultai. So I'm going to say Endure is actually our Abzan ability. So Renew, here we go, is going to be Sultai, like I mentioned. And what Renew basically does is you are going to be able to pay a certain amount of mana for a card and then exile that card from your graveyard and you get some sort of payoff. This is a really cool mechanic. I think it's really interesting and I'm really curious to see how powerful it is, not only in pre-release, but once it hits standard or commander or those type of things. So keep an eye out on Renew cards. And finally, my card type, Harmonize. So Harmonize, you can think of it as kind of like Convoke and Flashback crammed together. So when you cast a card, the card does its ability, it goes into your graveyard. For its Harmonize cost, you have the opportunity to recast that card. Now the thing that is different about this is you can tap one creature and the cost of that Harmonize ability is lowered by however powerful that creature is. So if the creature has 3 power and you tap it, the Harmonize cost is lowered by 3 colorless. Keep in mind, you can't take away the colors of mana, but you can take away colorless mana using that ability. And then in some instances, you can cast the card almost for cheaper than you originally cast it. So keep a lookout for Harmonize cards that are going to be really powerful and do everything that you want. So now our first round of cards, you're going to see that I have a bunch of categories at the top of my Chrome window, and hate to tell you, there's 2 more. Like I said, we have a ton of cards to get into, but first off, I wanted to hit the quote-unquote cycles within the set. First cycle that we have here is Devotee, and this is just going to be a way to filter your mana, given the different clans that you have, into something that might be manageable. So if you're short on, in this instance, red, you could filter an extra black into it and get yourself a red. Now keep in mind, these abilities can only be activated once each turn. So knowing that, we're going to call that the Devotee ability. So for Mardu Devotee of 1 plane, this creature also, when it enters, gives you Scry and does its Devotee ability. Next up, we have Jeskai, 1 in a red. It's Jeskai Devotee ability, and here's our first instance of Flurry. So whenever you cast your second spell each turn, this creature gets +1/+1 until the end of turn. Now, coming up, we got Abzan Devotee. So it has its Devotee ability. The card costs 1 and a black, and for 2 and a black, you can return this card from your graveyard to your hand. Then we have Temur Devotee, which is 1 and a blue, Defender, and its Devotee ability. I think this one may or may not be the weakest, but we'll see. Now the Sultai Devotee, 1 and a green. This one has Death Touch, this creature, and its Devotee ability. Next up, we are going to jump into Monuments. So with Monuments, basically, once again, assigned with the clans. When it enters, you can search for one of the basic land types that is associated with that clan. You put it in your hand, shuffle your library, clearly reveal it too to make sure you pulled a basic land out. But they have their own abilities also. So the Jeskai one costs 2, and then the ability is 1 and Jeskai. Tap, sacrifice this artifact, create 2 1/1 white bird creature tokens with flying, activate only as a sorcery. The Abzan one costs the same, and the ability is 1 in Abzan. Tap, sacrifice, create an XX white spirit creature token where X is the greatest toughness among creatures you control. Next one, Sultai. Once again, same cost, except the ability this time is 2 in Sultai. Tap, sacrifice this artifact, create 2 2/2 zombie tokens. Now the Mardu one costs the same, but like with the Sultai, the ability is 2 and Mardu. Tap, sacrifice, create 3 1/1 red warrior creature tokens that have menace and haste until the end of turn. And finally the Teamer one, once again 2, and this is our most expensive ability. You're going to look at 3 and Teamer. Tap, sacrifice this artifact, create a 5/5 green elephant creature. So that is our monuments. Next up, I want to go into talking about the lands. So I assume every single clan themed pack is going to have the 3-color, the tri-land, tri-gnome, whatever you want to call them, associated with the pack when you untap it, and they tap and then can be tapped for one of whatever the clan type is. Now jumping into that, getting a little more interesting, each color has its own version of a specific rare land. And what we see here is the green one, and it enters tapped unless you control an island or a swamp. Taps for its color. And then 3 and a green, tap, surveil 2. I think it has some interesting areas where it can work. Probably not the best. But next we have the 1 for black, and it enters tapped unless you control a forest or plains. Taps for its own color. 1 in a black, tap, exile a creature card from your graveyard, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token. Next up is red, so enters tapped unless you control a plains or island, taps for its color. 3 in a red, tap, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. Now, I think the strongest one, potentially the strongest one, is blue. So it enters tapped unless you control a mountain or a forest, and then taps for its color. And then for a blue, tap, the next spell you cast this turn can't be countered. Good way to get the game done and finished and get across the line. And finally, the white one is enters tapped unless you control a swamp or a mountain, and then taps for one of its color, and 2 and a plains. Tap whenever you attack this turn, create 2 1/1 red warrior creature tokens that are tapped and attacking, sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. So that is our special lands that are being presented to us. Our next cycle, I promise we're almost done with the cycles. The Dragonstorm Cycle. So first here we have the red one, Breaching Dragonstorm, 4 in a red, and when this enchantment enters, exile cards from the top of your library. Until you exile a non-land card, you may cast it without paying its mana cost if its mana value is less than 9, so 8 or less. And if you don't, put that card into your hand. And the cool thing about the Dragonstorm enchantment is when a dragon you control enters, return the enchantment back to its owner's hand. So you can have a way to make it replayable, and if you have a lot of dragons, you can get a lot of value out of these. Looking at Teaming Dragonstorm for white, when this enchantment enters, creates 2 2/2 white soldier creature tokens. Our green one is 3 and a green, Encroaching Dragonstorm. When this enchantment enters, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. And this is pretty cool because it's kind of like a repeatable explosive vegetation. Is it viable? I don't know, but it's cool and different. I like it. Then Corroding Dragonstorm. When this enchantment enters, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life, and Surveil 2. Pretty decent. Probably not going to be great during the pre-release or draft, but really good in Commander. I think you can really knock down a bunch of life at the table. And then finally, blue, Rolling Dragonstorm, 1 and a blue. When this enchantment enters, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. Kind of feels weird because it kind of feels a little bit like maybe a red, looting style card. Hey, we got it in blue, so helping blue out there, move cards around. Next up, our next little cycle that we have is Sieges. Our first one is Windcrag Siege. And the cool thing about the Sieges is, if some people might remember, there were the Khans or dragons choice in the original Tarkir sets, and this one is going with competing against both clans. So on this one we have Mardu versus Jeskai, and what are you going to pick when it enters? So on this one, if a creature attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. That's real good. And then Jeskai side is, at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. It gains lifelink and haste until the end of turn. That's not bad either. It creates only 1, but that 1 can do a lot. Now, Hallowmurk Siege. Sultai versus Abzan. Sultai, whenever a counter is put on a creature you control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. And then Abzan, whenever you attack, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature, and it gains menace until end of turn. Glacier Wood Siege is going to be Temur and Sultai, which is, this one's a weird one. But for the Temur side, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, target player mills 4 cards. Oh, okay. And then Sultai, you may play lands from your graveyard, which kind of seems like a little pseudo, I want to say, Crucible of Worlds, which is pretty neat. And then we have the Baron. This guy's actually going to be 2 and a white and black, and it's Abzan versus Mardu. So Abzan, at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, each of them. That's wild. And then the Mardu is, at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under your control this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature of their choice. Woo! That is a spicy one to finish the Siege cycle on. Wow. Okay. Next up, we're gonna dive into the Exhale, and I think that's perfect because I need to exhale after all that. The Exhale cycles. So these guys, you are going to Behold a Dragon, which we didn't talk about at the beginning. But basically what Beholding a Dragon is, if you have a dragon on the battlefield, you go point to it and go, I behold a dragon. Or if you have one in your hand, you can show it to your opponent and say, look, I got a dragon. Beholding a Dragon is going to give you an additional sort of benefit throughout all of these cycles, and we'll hit on that. So for Piercing Exhale, 1 and a green, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker, and if a dragon was beheld, Surveil 2. Now Molten Exhale, 1 and a red, you may cast this spell as though it had flash if you beheld a dragon, as an additional cost to cast it. And Molten Exhale deals 4 to target creature or planeswalker. Dispelling Exhale, 1 and a blue, and counter target spell unless its controller pays 2, and if you beheld the dragon, then they need to pay 4. Osseous Exhale, 1 and a white, and Osseous Exhale deals 5 damage to target attacking or blocking creature, and if a dragon was beheld, you gain 2 life. And finally, our Caustic Exhale is a Swamp of Black. If a dragon was beheld, you can just pay the swamp. Otherwise, you can pay an additional 1 colorless and a swamp to cast this spell. Target creature gets -3/-3 until the end of turn. That's a good little finisher there. That was a lot. But we got through all of these specific cycles that are in this set. Now, let's get into different types of decks that may come out of this. And I wanted to stay away from looking at things of clan specific, because you can add additional colors in, and you can even take colors away and run like red white or green black if you wanted, if the card pool leaned towards that and your clan specific pack didn't quite give you the heat that you were looking for. So I wanted to talk just about specific style of decks that we can run into. We are going to talk about tokens, and this is a token boy if I ever saw one, and he's perfect for mobilize, and he utilizes himself too. This is perfect. Zurgo, Thunderer's Decree, and he is going to cost you Mardu, and he's mobilized 2. And then during your end step, warrior tokens you control have this token can't be sacrificed. So what does that mean? So in the mobilize ability, right? We talked about it. Mobilize 2. You're going to get 2 1/1 red warrior tokens that come in and are attacking. But it says sacrifice them at the beginning of the end step. If you have Zurgo out, you skip that, because now they can't be sacrificed. And let me put a super important point on the table, is if Zurgo disappears and you still have those tokens on, the next end step, you still don't sacrifice those tokens. It's a one-time trigger, and if it made it past that one-time trigger because of our man here, Zurgo, then they stay on the battlefield till they get sacrificed from something else or they die, whatever it might be. Next card looking at tokens is Bone Karen Butcher. It's 1 and Mardu. Mobilize 2, and attacking tokens you control have Death Touch. Next up, we have Hardened Tactician, 1 white-black, and its ability is 1, sacrifice a token, draw a card. That's going to be crucial if you can get a lot of tokens on the field. Just get to the cards that you need as soon as possible. Now this guy, Taigum, Master Opportunist, 1 in a blue. Ooh, okay, we're gonna talk about this. So he has our Flurry ability that we talked about with Jeskai, and whenever you cast a second spell each turn, copy it, then exile the spell you cast with 4 time counters on it. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. So this is going to be an incredible one for, I think, a lot of the decks. Any of them that can utilize blue, but I really like this one for Teamer, because Teamer has that harmonize mechanic. And when you harmonize, the card doesn't come back and then go back to the graveyard. You exile that card after you harmonize. If you have out Taigum, what you can do is harmonize, so the original copy comes out of the graveyard, it gets cast, then Taigum creates a copy of that actually gets cast and played, resolves. The original copy that came out of your graveyard gets 4 time counters on it, and now it's a completely different object than the one that came out of your graveyard. So when the 4 time counters disappear and it resolves, it goes back into your graveyard. It doesn't exile. So then you can cast it again and bring it back out. Really cool interaction that is able to be had there. I like it. Next up, Anafenza, Unyielding Lineage. 2 and a white, flash, first strike, and whenever another non-token creature you control dies, Anafenza endures 2. We talked about endures earlier. That's going to be a strong one because it's anytime a non-token creature dies. Ooh, Anafenza can get big, or your board can get huge. Next up, this one is gonna be a finisher and a killer for people, and I'm terrified. Marshal of the Lost, 2 white-black, Death Touch. Whenever you attack, target creature gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of attacking creatures. That could be huge, especially in a token deck where you might just be throwing everything at it. So this could be incredible. Now keep in mind, this doesn't trigger or get bigger off of mobilize, because this ability has already happened when the mobilize trigger actually brings those tokens into play. Now, woo, big dog, big daddy hoof. All right, we got the Crater Hoof reprint 5 and 3 green haste, and when this creature enters, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until the end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. This is gonna end game so quick. I haven't seen actually anybody pull a Crater Hoof yet from YouTube videos or anything like that, but my gosh, if you pull this and you're able to get this off, ooh, you're gonna clean the table easy. That's an instant win. Now we are going to jump in those big fun cards that are just gonna roll over people, and you don't necessarily need the token synergy to make it work for you. The first card I want to look into is Mammoth Bellow, and that is 2 in Teamer. Create a 5/5 green elephant creature token, and this has Harmonize, and the Harmonize is 5 in Teamer. So what does that mean? You can create the elephant token by casting this spell, and then you can instantly tap that elephant token to Harmonize for less than you just paid to actually cast the original spell. Now keep in mind, this spell will go to exile after you Harmonize. I also want to make sure that everybody knows that for Harmonize, you are choosing to tap a creature. It has nothing to do with res sickness. So as soon as it comes in, it can be tapped for Harmonize, and that seems honestly perfect, because you can utilize those creatures that otherwise would just sit there and be blocking for no reason. Now we have Dragon Claw Strike, and this is one of our hybrid manas, so you can cast it for Teamer, or you can change out any of those colors for 2 colorless. And this card doubles the power and toughness of target creature you control until end of turn. Then it fights up to 1 target creature and opponent controls. This one is gonna either put damage on something you think you're just too far out of range to kill, or this guy's gonna end games. It's gonna be such a good card. Next up, we have a combination of the last 2 cards. We have Roar of Endless Song, and for the same cost of Elephant Bellow, so 2 in Teamer, it is a saga that the first 2 steps, you create a 5/5 green elephant creature token, and then on the third, you get to double the power and toughness of each creature you control until the end of turn. So that's going to be a great card to have. Just build up your board and then increase that power and swing in. Next up, we have Warden of the Grove, 2 and a green. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Whenever another non-token creature you control enters, it endures, which we talked about, where X, well, it endures X, where X is the number of counters on this creature. That's going to make things so huge, so huge. Next up, I think this one's going to be an amazing commander, but it's going to be perfect in limited 2 and sealed. So Felithor, Dawn of the Azban, and for Azban cost, Abzan, I'll get it eventually, Abzan cost, trample. Whenever Felithor enters or attacks, you may sacrifice a non-land permanent. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So running this thing with some sort of tokens would be perfect. Otherwise, if you have small creatures that you can create pretty easy, once again, another great card. And the fact that it has trample just kind of finishes it off, because you're just going to run over people. Now we have Naga Flesh Crafter, 3 in a blue. You may have this creature enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. Any creature on the battlefield, not just your side. Anybody. And then our first instance of Renew, so 2 in a blue. Exile this card from your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on target non-legendary creature you control. Each other creature you control becomes a copy of that creature until end of turn. and you can activate this only as a sorcery. That's going to be amazing. I mean, just think about the elephant tokens. You can just turn everything on your board into 5/5s. Ooh, that's another one that's just going to run away with games. So Host of the Hereafter, 2 black-green. This creature enters with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, put its counters on up to 1 target creature you control. So it's kind of like a weird, easier on your opponent Ozolith. So I think this card is going to be a killer too, with how many +1/+1 counters we can create in this set. Eshki Dragonclaw, 1 Anteamer, Vigilance, Trample, Ward 1. At the beginning of your combat on your turn, if you've cast both a creature spell and a non-creature spell this turn, draw a card and put 2 +1/+1 counters on Eshki. And Eshki enters as a 4/4 already. So Eshki is going to be kind of a draw engine and really a good way to get real big. The thing that you need with that is you need somewhat of a balance of creature and non-creature spells, but if you're leaning creature heavy, Eshki probably shouldn't be in your deck. But if you have that balance, Eshki is going to be insane for you. Now, one of my most interesting and I think a little bit underrated cards is Temur Battlecrier. For Temur, during your turn, spells you cast cost 1 colorless less to cast for each creature you control with power 4 or greater, and it enters with power 4 already. So everything instantly costs 1 less. Keep in mind, this is spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, not creature spells. Any spell costs 1 less to cast. Card is bonkers, super overlooked. It's going to be insane. I'm excited to see it blow up, and I'll admit if I'm wrong, but I think it's going to blow up. Dereve, Heart of the Storm, 1 in Mardu, flying. If a creature you control that entered this turn would deal damage, it deals twice that much damage instead, and it's a 4/5. So those haste creatures are doing double the work for you as soon as they come in. Now, Ureni, the Song Unending, 5 Anteamer, protection from white and black and flying. And when Ureni enters, it deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers your opponent controls, where X is the number of lands you control. It's a 10/10 at least. That's going to be so good. So you're at least divvying up 8 damage, and then you have 10 damage on board, and it has protection from the key removal colors in this set and others. I'm excited to see where this card goes. Finally, for the run over category, Mardu Siegebreaker, 1 and Mardu, Death Touch and Haste. When this creature enters, exile up to 1 other target creature you control until this creature leaves the battlefield. Whenever this creature attacks, for each opponent, create a tap token that's a copy of the exiled card attacking that opponent. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice those tokens. It's a 4/4. This is an insane card to have just in a regular set. It sounds like a commander card. Just such a commander card. So you get to steal something, and then when you attack, it basically has pseudo style myriad of that thing that you stole. So good, so good. I mean, I think it'll be fine in sealed and like 1v1 formats, but it's going to be so much better in commander. And just creating a copy after you steal something is like a double smack in the face to your opponent. It's insane. It's incredible. Okay, now we are going to dive into our next group of things. Hopefully we can get through this quick. First off, we are going to talk about Graveyard Recursion, and wow, another one of my favorite cards in the set. This is so good. Lotus Light Dancers. You have 2 in Sultai, and it's lifelink creature that enters as a 3/6, let me say. And when this creature enters, search your library for a black card, a green card, a blue card. put those cards into your graveyard, then shuffle. So this is going to be something that you just fill up your graveyard and then get benefit or bring stuff back out that you might be able to recur. I want everybody to keep in mind that a black card can be a black and white card. It just has to have black on it. A green card just has to have the green in the casting cost. A blue card just has to have blue in the casting cost on the card. So it doesn't have to just be monocolored. It can be a multicolor card. I think this is so cool. Also, if you splash, which I wouldn't recommend, but if for some reason you splash for this card and you don't have any, let's say, black cards in your deck, that's more than fine. That's more than fine. You go, you search, you fail to find. It doesn't say that you absolutely have to bring the card back. If you fail to find, that's okay. So Lotus Light Dancers, one of my favorites. So excited for it. Stillness in Motion. 1 in a blue. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, mill 3 cards. Then, if your library has no cards in it, exile this enchantment and put 5 cards from your graveyard on top of your library in any order. I think if you're just milling things, just trying to get everything in your graveyard to get benefits out of it, this is going to be crazy. And then you can choose the 5 cards that you take from your graveyard and becomes your deck. Now this is dangerous because your opponent can find a way to mill you out, but you get to stack that deck and it can be so good if you get lucky enough. Next up, Avenger of the Fallen, 2 in a black, Death Touch, mobilize X, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. And it's a 2/4. Love this card. I think that's so cool that it actually is going to go and count what is in your graveyard and benefit off of that. There were some cards that did it in Aether Drift, and I believe I had it in my pre-release kit. Worked so great for me. Just fun cards to play. Now, Yathin Road Watcher. We have 1 in Abzan. When this creature enters, if you cast it, mill 4 cards. When you do, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Cool. Great little piece of recursion. Now, Tarsa Light Shatter, 2 in a red, haste. When Tarsa enters, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. Whenever Tarsa attacks, if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, exile a card at random from your graveyard. You may play that card this turn. I think that's going to be pretty sweet. Now, Lie in Wait in Sultai. Return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. Lie in Wait deals damage equal to the card's power to target creature. Great card. Does what it does and that's it. Attuned Hunter, 2 in a green, trample. Whenever 1 or more cards leaves your graveyard during your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Starts out as a 3/3. Great card. In a deck like this where you're going to have a lot of graveyard recursion, it's going to get so big. It's going to be such a good card for you. Keep an eye out for that. Perenation. We have 3 in Abzan. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a hexproof counter on it and an indestructible counter on it. Remember I said bring something that you can write out little counters on. This is a perfect example of that. And it comes back with hexproof and indestructible. Yuck! Awaken the Honored Dead. Now we have Sultai, destroy target non-land permanent. Great. Mill 3 cards. Exactly what you want to do in those colors. You may discard a card. When you do, return target creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. Perfect. Perfect. The Sib Sig Ceremony. 3 black. Creature spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. Whenever a creature you control enters, if you cast it, destroy that creature, then create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. So it seems a little weird. I feel like it needs a little bit to like get up and going, but if you're trying to cast stuff out of your graveyard to get additional benefit, this card could be really good. And I think it has a place, but I think it is definitely a gamble in order to play this one. Taval, Arbiter of Virtue. So 2 and Sultai. flying, lifelink. Spells you cast have delve. So that means each card you exile from your graveyard while casting this spell pays for 1. So you would take those cards out of your graveyard to make this guy even cheaper. And spells in general, because it gives all spells you have delve. And whenever you cast a spell, you lose life equal to its mana cost. Now, I know people are a little bit terrified of this, but keep in mind, Taval has lifelink and is a 6/6. So yes, you're going to be losing a little bit of life because there isn't colorless that you can just ignore, but you're going to gain at least 6 life, and chances are you're probably gaining way more benefit off of that, and you're probably gaining more life than you're losing. Rite of Renewal, 3 and a green, return up to 2 target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. Target player shuffles up to 4 target cards from their graveyard into their library. Exile Rite of Renewal. That is going to be beautiful. Great way to get 2 cards out of your graveyard directly into your hand where you might want them. And then target player shuffles up to 4 target cards from their graveyard into their library. Fill up the library again. Give me more. Put me in, coach. Korsai Revenant. We have 1 black flying death touch lifelink. Renewal. So 2 and a black, you exile this card and put a flying counter, a death touch counter, a lifelink counter, and a lifelink counter on target creature. Activate only as a sorcery. So yeah, once again, creating those own unique counters. This is the guy that you want for it, and it's a sorcery. Sidisi works like a birthing pod for Sidisi. So 1 in black, and tap sacrifice creature you control with mana value X other than Sidisi. Return target creature card with mana value X +1 from your graveyard to the battlefield. Great way to get it out there. I love it. Shiko, Paragon of the Way, 2 in Jeskai. Flying Vigilance. When Shiko enters, exile target non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard, copy it, and then you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Good way to get a free copy of those lower mana value cards directly out of your graveyard into the field where you want it. And finally, for graveyard recursion, Smile at Death. 3 and white enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, return up to 2 target creature cards with power of 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Put a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures. Yes, once again, these are low power guys for the most part, but you're getting counters on it, so it activates some creatures that care about counters. And there's a lot of 2 power or less that are going to benefit you a lot. We just saw Sidisi does that. Sidisi is a 1/3, and I wanted to talk about some cards that I didn't feel like really fit in any specific area, but are just great cards regardless. So let's get into it and let's see what are just great cards that you can include almost no matter what. First off, we have Iridescent Tiger, 4 and a red. When this creature enters, if you cast it, add Wooburg. That is all 5 colors. It's a 3/4. There's already a couple infinite combos that you can do in Commander, and I believe even Standard potentially, or Modern it might be, but this card is going to be such a game changer and potential to actually make things way easier for you if you end up splashing for maybe a 4th color or even your 3 colors. If you feel like you don't have enough support, this guy will help you out. Next up, Sage of the Skies, 2 and a white. When you cast this spell, if you've cast another spell this turn, copy this spell, and it has flying and lifelink, and it's a 2/3, so both of those copies have lifelink included on them. This is kind of like Flurry for the creature itself. So cool. This can be your 2nd spell that you cast. It's going to activate so many things because it triggers Flurry, it triggers itself. Yes, I'm here for it. Starry-Eyed Skyrider, 2 and a white, flying. Whenever this creature attacks, Another target creature you control gains flying until the end of turn. Attacking tokens you control have flying. Scavenger Regent, 3 and a black, but I don't care about the dragon side of it. That's right, I said I don't care about dragons in Dragonstorm. We have Exude Toxin, X black. It's that Omen cost there, and Omen is so cool, but I feel like they didn't do as much as they could with it. So what does this one do? Each non-dragon creature gets -X until the end of turn. And with Omen, it seems like adventure at first, but you cast the Omen cost, you shuffle this card back into your library. You can play it as many times as you want, as long as you're using that Omen cost. Next up, Nature's Rhythm. This is going to be a bomb that comes out of this set. It's so good. So X and green, search your library for a creature card with mana value X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. And it has Harmonize. Once again, Harmonize. It's X and 4 green. So if you have 4 green on the field, you're made. And if you have a big tough creature, you can get almost anything out. Now we have our newest addition into the good old theme of a deck can have any number of type of cards. So you heard of in Foundation, we went rabbit hunting for the hare. Now we're going bird hunting. That's right, we have Tempest Hawk, 2 and a white, flying, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may search for another Tempest Hawk, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. It's a 2/2, and your deck can have any number of them. Now we have Storm Scale Scion, 4 red flying. Other dragons you control get +1/+1, and you have Storm. So, and it's also a 4/4. The old heads know, the new heads might not know. Storm is basically, if you know you're going to cast that card, you need to keep track of how many cards you cast before you cast this card on your turn, and you get copies equal to it. So if you cast 3 cards on your turn and then cast Storm Scale Scion, you get Storm Scale Scion and then 3 copies on top of it. It is so powerful. I'm glad they made it expensive, because otherwise it would be insane and I would maybe quit Magic forever. Next up, we have Revival of the Ancestors. So we have 1 N Abzan. Create 3 1/1 White Spirit tokens. Then second, distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures you control. And then third step, creatures you control gain trample, lifelink until end of turn. Good little card. Now, this one is not going to probably be that great in more smaller ends of play, like pre-release and certain levels of constructed. It's probably not even that good in standard, but Commander will love this card. It costs Wooburg, and it is called Call the Spirit Dragons. You're summoning every single one of them. So dragons you control have indestructible, and at the beginning of your upkeep, for each color, put a +1/+1 counter on a dragon you control of that color. If you put +1/+1 counters on 5 dragons this way, you win the game. So you have to wait 5 upkeeps, but if you have all 5 colors, you're good to go. You are good to go, and that dragon goes insane. That's how we win in 5 turns. Next up, Songcrafter Mage. It's in Teamer. It has flash, and when this creature enters, target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard gains Harmonize until the end of turn. Its Harmonize cost is equal to its mana cost, and it is a 3/2. This is insane, because Harmonize, I think, is going to be a really good mechanic and a really good way to get lower costs out of the cards that you really want to play that maybe got killed a little bit too early. Songcrafter Mage, incredible. Dragonologist, 2 in a blue. When this creature enters, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal an instant or sorcery or dragon card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Untapped dragons you control have hexproof. Just a good little dragon card. So Flamehold Grappler in Jeskai. It has first strike. When this creature enters, copy the next spell you would cast this turn when you cast it. You may choose new targets for the copy. And then it's a 3/3. Keep in mind, this is the next spell you cast. So it is not the next instant or sorcery, it is just the next spell you cast. You get the copy. Cool little card. Clarion Conqueror, 2 and a white, flying, activated abilities of artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers can't be activated. It's a 3/3. We'll talk about why this card could be a little bit of a bruiser in this set for us. Krumar Initiate, 1 and a black, and it has X and a black, tap, pay X life. This creature endures X, activate only as a sorcery. So an interesting little thing that you can do here is if you pay X as 0, and there are, I believe, 2 or 3 cards in the set that when a creature dies on your side of the battlefield, you gain 1 life, and there's, I think, 1 that deals damage to your opponents. Depending on how much black mana you have, just pay 0 for X. So it ends up being black, tap, pay 0 life, and when you endure, you choose to make a 0/0 white spirit creature, and it just dies instantly. You get a die trigger, you gain life, and potentially hurt your opponent. Do that. That seems really cool. If you get those 2 cards together, please do that for me and let me know how good it actually worked out. Auroral Procession is green and a blue. It's an instant. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand. This should have been in the graveyard recursion. What was I thinking? But it's still a great card, and it's an auto include and everything. Next up, All Out Assault, 2 and Mardu. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Death Touch. When this enchantment enters, if it's your main phase, there is an additional combat phase after this one, followed by an additional main phase. When you next attack this turn, untap each creature you control. Great. You get another main phase, you get another combat phase. Wow. Okay. Yeah, let's go. And I wish this one was part of the Dragonstorm thing, so I could just bounce it back to my hand and do it again. Bounce it back and do it again. And bounce it back and do it again. But they didn't think that they could give me that much. So moving on to the next one, Dragonback Assault. That's 3 in Teamer. When this enchantment enters, it deals 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker, and it has landfall. So when a land enters, you get a 4/4 red dragon token with flying. That's going to be so good if you can find a way to utilize it. Now, I didn't include combat tricks and removal because in this set, basically all of them are good, but understand, this one is so good, I had to include it. Duty Beyond Death. It is 1 and a white instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. The fact that we can do that, that is incredible. This card's amazing. Yes. Play it and everything. Jeez, I almost splashed for it, I swear. Next up, our little most talked about removal, Inevitable Defeat, 1 and Mardu. It's an instant. This spell can't be countered. Exile target, non-land permanent. Its controller loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. Now, Draco Genesis. Is it good? Is it bad? Or is it just a card? 6 and a red enchantment. You may cast dragon spells without paying their mana cost. I think it could be really good if you have a dragon deck, because by the time you get to 8 mana, you're still going to have a handful of dragons because they're kind of expensive. So get to 8 mana, cast Draco Genesis, go crazy, empty out the hand, smash the board, win the game. Next, Voice of Victory, 1 and a plains, mobilize 2. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, and it is a 1/3. Seems real good. We got a couple stacks pieces in this set. I'm terrified. I don't want to play against them. Next up, we have Rakshasa's Bargain, and this is the hybrid mana that we had talked about previous with a Teamer card, except you're seeing it in Sultai. It's an instant look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. That's incredible value. You can look at the top 4 cards of your library, take half of them, put them into your hand, and because you're playing Sultai, you're basically putting all 4 into your hand, because when the rest go to the graveyard, you're gonna get them back. I promise. Now, Kotis the Fang Keeper, 1 and Sultai, indestructible. This is a commander, 2 if I ever saw one. Whenever Kotis deals combat damage to a player, exile the top X cards of their library, where X is the amount of damage dealt. You may cast any number of spells with mana value X or less from among them without paying their mana cost. It's a 2/1 at base. Whoa. Free spells from your opponent's deck. Yeah, great. Now we're almost there. United Battlefront, 3 and a white sorcery. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put up to 2 non-creature, non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. That's great. I know, once again, low value, but ooh, those low values can be so good. Throw them onto the battlefield, put the rest at the bottom. Yeah, I'm in. I like it. Now, the chaser for this set, Mox Jasper. Cost 0, legendary artifact. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. Activate only if you control a dragon. You know what? I actually think my Prosh deck kind of wants one of these. But it's a little bit niche, but I think it's really good. And I think with dragons probably going to start making their way into certain decks more than we've seen before, this card is going to be pretty stable in price and just a great include in most decks. Now let's talk about it. The white token doubler. It's Elsbeth the Storm Slayer. Now, why did they put lightning across the name? I have no clue. I'm not part of design. It's a cool effect, but it makes it hard for some people to read. It's 3 white, legendary planeswalker. If 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. The +1 creates a 1/1 soldier token, which is really 2. And 0, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain flying until your next turn. Great, because they have flying till your next turn, so throughout your opponent's turn also. -3, destroy target creature and opponent controls with mana value 3 or greater, and this guy enters with 5 loyalty. And finally, to wrap it up, we got your boy. It's the big dog. It's the Ugin coming out of left field. Ugin, Eye of the Storms. I don't know if you can hear, but it's storming at my house. He knew it. He was showing up early. There is a 7-cost legendary planeswalker, Ugin. When you cast this spell, exile up to 1 target permanent that's 1 or more colors. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, exile up to 1 target permanent that's 1 or more colors. It's +2. You gain 3 life and draw a card. Win. It's 0. Add 3 colorless. Well, actually, 3 wastes. Not even colorless. 3 waste. Incredible. Incredible. And then it enters with 7, but if you get up there, which isn't that hard, -11, search your library for any number of colorless non-land cards. Exile them, then shuffle. Until end of turn, you may cast those cards without paying their mana cost. That's it. Okay, so Ugin's incredible. Ugin is so insane. If you pull one, I am so happy for you. I am hoping I can maybe get a collector box and get a chance to get an Ugin. But ladies and gentlemen, I know it was a long video. Don't worry, I appreciate you sitting here and listening to me ramble through all these cards. Please, please, please let me know how you do in the pre-release. Let me know what you think of the video. Let me know what you're playing as far as a clan. Let me know if you think maybe I missed something that I should have really talked about. But I will see you after the pre-release. Hopefully this time I remember to record my video and we have some footage of me hanging out during the pre-release and talking about my deck. But until next time, peace, be good, be kind, and go win me a pre-release.